All right. Welcome everybody who's logging on. We are going to kick things off in a few minutes. We'll let folks filter in. And then I'll introduce Connie and John. And we'll sit here awkwardly while we wait for everybody to join.
Or you can blow us up in the chat. You can tell us your name, where you're chatting in from.
Yeah, where are you?
Hear about what your favorite glaze is, why you're here, what you're snacking on. Who's going to go first?
If you've seen the recent bracket for world's most popular glaze that just ran on Instagram, very interesting. Esport trade, justice for Malibu. That's funny. I was pretty blown away that indigo, which is a glaze most people have never seen, won. Yeah, that was really surprising. Carrie from Saluda. What are hits?
There's those like digestive cookies that have like kind of not that sweet milk chocolate in the middle. They're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went through a phase at the old Pottery where we buy like those little digestive biscuits for tea time.
Yeah, you were very interested in this.
Oh, I love it.
Snacks that don't have flavor.
Yeah, no flavor, just slight sweetness. And I think maybe they were like trying to say that there was fiber in it, so they were good for you.
John, you were always big on fiber. You always had like.
You gotta have it, yeah.
John's always telling me that he like loves a snack that's just like bland, crunchy.
It's like a salty, simple carbohydrate, like a tortilla chip, saltine crackers. Yeah, that's what I need. Pretzel.
Connie, should we do one of these on Clubhouse?
I don't know about Clubhouse. It scares me. So I like when I accidentally land in a Clubhouse, I really get scared. All right, should we start?
Yeah, we can start. We've got 40 people here. I think that's good.
Yeah.
Lindsay from Asheville's here.
Catherine's having
Lindsay loves eggshell. Don't have any good snacks.
No good snacks. Some people just aren't snackers.
Highest seconds rate by glaze. That's an interesting question from Marla. Oh, Twizzlers. Some glazes, especially if they haven't been totally vetted, which we're getting better at, can have a very, very high seconds rate. Like celery. I remember celery had like an intense seconds rate for a long time. So anyways, thank you all for joining. With us, we have John Vigeland, East Forks co-founder and CFO, and Connie Matisse, East Forks co-founder and CMO, and my lovely wife. And I'm Alex, East Forks founder and CEO. And we're going to answer a few of the great questions that you all sent in. We are going to, did you guys see? Yeah, we did see Jessica, the bracket. We were talking about that as people were joining. I thought it was pretty amazing. And I found out who runs that account, and I offered them a job. Just joking. We're going to start out with a question from Debbie Vigeland. Now, Debbie Vigeland, most of you probably don't know this, is John's mother. And John's mom and dad used to come out and help us at the Pottery doing the books in the cash register for our kiln sales way back in the day. And if there is anything, both Debbie and John, they are very thorough. And Debbie would chase down a dime if it was missing from the register to make sure that all of the accounts were in order. And John certainly has some of those tendencies, which makes for very tight books. Anyways, Debbie's question: what are your top goals for 2021, and how confident are you that you will have the resources to achieve them? This question sounds like it's from, say, a potential investor or something like that at a pitch. But it's not. Our big goals for 2021 right now are to get through the year without losing our minds or making anybody else on our teams lose their minds. And so that's taking some real stock of what our goals are and looking at them divorced from kind of the ego, which is sometimes what drives me to do more and more and more and push everyone to do more and more and more, and find ways to do that. So whether that's basically just giving ourselves a little tiny bit of space to mess up once in a while. So right now we're assessing our goals for the year, and we have some big things that need to happen. Like we're building out a huge amount of capacity right now. We've started construction on a new, well, it's not a new building, but it's where our fulfillment team is located just down the road, and our QC teams. And we're actually going to be moving glaze over there. So we will make and bisque fire pottery here at Short McDowell at our first factory. Then we will load it into a big box truck, take it a few miles down the road, and glaze it, fire it, and QC it, ship it out. So that's a huge project. We've got new kilns coming. We've got new forming machines coming that are going to get installed here at Short McDowell. New glazing machinery, new people, very exciting, but a very big project. So I think if we can get all of that installed and operational by the end of the year, we will have done a tremendous amount. So, and do we have the resources to achieve them? We are figuring that out, but we are pretty confident that we'll be able to find those resources, primarily cash resources. So that's what John's doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Question.
Well, I'd just jump off of that real quick and just say that when we came into the year, we did have some pretty ambitious growth goals, and pretty much right away, like in the first 4 weeks, we started to see some red flags getting thrown up that indicated that that those growth goals not only would be putting a lot of pressure on us as an executive team, but like the effects of that fast growth could potentially like trickle into every single department in the company and cause some undue harm and stress. And for folks who have already been, living in the pandemic setting for a year, all of our resilience is like really being tested, and it's been a really hard year for everybody. So that really called into question what Alex was talking about, like really asked us to examine why we were trying to grow as quickly as, or we thought we knew why we needed to grow in order to cover our costs. And all of those, that first 4 weeks really caused us to look at some paths that we hadn't really considered for a long time. So I don't remember the turn of phrase that makes that. Never mind. I thought I had it. Never mind. There was an idiom that just didn't come to me. Moving on. We're just trying to be conscientious about how growth can really impact people's mental health.
Yeah. And we're still growing at a really crazy rate, just trying to not, it might not be a doubling, which is what we've been doing year after year. And that also gets harder the bigger you get. So, yeah. So we've got some more questions. Who'd like to, we've got this new feature, the Q&A feature. Who'd like to hop in and answer a question?
Let's answer whatever happened to those kilns from Turkey.
Okay, I'll answer it live. What happens? Okay.
You just have
I clicked that I'm answering it live. Anyways, those kilns from Turkey are still in Turkey. And what happened was these kilns are, all of the kilns that we're purchasing now are industrial kilns. So they're large and they're complex. And these kilns were built in a way that a lot of the, they'd be put together in their final location by the company that made them. So the owner of this company would come with his crew and they would put them together. Essentially right before they were about to ship, the pandemic happened, and they couldn't come, and they still can't come. So now those kilns are there and we're just waiting, but we had to keep moving forward. So we ended up purchasing other kilns from Portugal, which are being built in such a way that we can install them ourselves. So those are getting ready to, it'd be fun. I could show pictures even, but that would take too much time. But yeah, those kilns are coming, and they're actually 2 or 3 times the size of the kilns that we had purchased from Turkey. So those will be on a boat in the next couple weeks, heading towards us. Done. Okay. We've got Connie, John, do you want to hop in and answer our next question? Emily Katz wrote in, what's your biggest pain point and what's your BHAG or moonshot highest dream for East Fork? What does ultimate success look like for East Fork? This is an interesting question because I think all of us might answer it slightly differently. So, yeah.
Yeah, and before we started this up, I was talking with Alex and Connie, just saying like, none of these questions on this list are easy questions. I'm having a hard time like thinking about how to answer any of these. And this is, yeah, I think to Alex's point, there's a lot in this one. I mean, biggest pain point, I feel like what I'm feeling now is less one single pain point, but just kind of the like a generalized rawness of like lots of pain points, and like having been kind of in the wind for a while, feeling them all. So I mean, there's a list to run through, but I think, yeah, maybe whereas before at a smaller scale, we might have had more discrete pain points that we were really focusing on resolving and moving to the next bottleneck, and it kind of had a more linear sense. I feel like we've spread out now to just a great diversity of pain points. But I mean, I think it's a good sign. Like we're taking on more, and we're learning how better to deal with the big pain points of the past. So I think we're breaking our big pain points into smaller fragments. I mean, yeah, right now the stuff, I think the main one for a lot of us is just like having lots of spinning plates going at the same time and trying to keep them all running. In the finance department right now, we're trying to get our tax return done. We're going through a full audit, which is kind of an agreement in our operating agreement to protect our investors, to have our accounting firm audit our financials to make sure everything's where it needs to be. But that's a lot of detailed work. We're in the final stages of getting our B Corp certification done. So I'm like doing a lot of to-dos with them, which is exciting, but also lots of to-dos. We're doing our annual development reviews organization-wide, where we do all of our performance reviews, where managers review their reports review the managers. A lot of work there. Yeah, so it's just like I think that's my pain point right now. It's just a lot of important stuff happening all at once, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot. This is an impossible question to answer. I feel like I don't really want to even try. I think a lot of it, I mean, for me, it always comes back to personnel issues and management, and acknowledging that I'm a person who loves nothing more than to jump in and save the day and make everybody feel good and healthy and happy and safe and secure, yeah, learning to understand like what I can and can't offer as a business owner, where my boundaries are with my ability to help people, how sometimes jumping in and helping can actually be really harmful if I'm not gathering information well enough, or if I'm only seeing one point of view. Just a lot of all the stuff around how to deal with humans who are all in a place together having very human experiences, and where our responsibilities as business owners lie, and what we what we can offer and what we can't, and then communicating that really, really clearly over and over and over and over and over and over again. So that's, I think I do a lot of that. That's really hard to kind of stay centered and sane. So grateful for my husband who puts up with a lot of my emotions and helps me stay grounded. I also think just like trying to we have, I think so we're speaking only for myself, like I have a pretty radical sense of how the world could look, and also a very realistic sense of what it looks like right now, and how while my vision for how a business can be more radical feels very alive in me. There's only so much that we can do in any given moment, and it can be really frustrating to really see just like the limitations that the system puts on us. So we can talk about being this and that, and being trying to think of radical new ways of doing business, but we're just never not coming up against realities of how much things cost, and different red tape that prevents us from being able to do things in creative new ways, and that can feel frustrating but also exciting.
And then, yeah, just to speak to the big, hairy, audacious goal at the end of this question, for me, it's getting to a place over the next couple of years where the entire team, the entire sort of manufacturing and office is back under one roof, and that we've done that while staying true to our values and our principles and what we believe in, and have invested in technology that, you know, fires things in a more efficient way and does all these things, but we still need to grow in order to justify that. So right now we're in a, you know, part of the team is in a warehouse, like I said, not on the other side of town, just a few miles away, but it's not a exactly a beautiful environment. And it's always been really important for us from the beginning that, like, the environment that you make something, the environment that you work in, that you spend a lot of your time is nice. That's like a joy. When I first built East Fork, was front and center at the old property out in Madison County. So getting to that point again for me is like the big, hairy, audacious goal, which isn't really that far out on the horizon. We don't talk about like building a $1 billion company or doing these things that that a lot of other kind of startups do and need to talk about in order to justify their funding or their valuation or all this stuff. But I mean, that still would be a sizable organization at that point to support a beautiful campus. So yeah. All right. Are you all looking at these questions, John, Connie?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to pick one?
You pick one.
All right. Here's a question for Connie. What determines whether a product stays in the line? Is it just sales amounts, efficiency? Wondering, for example, like tumbler being kicked and juice cups being in. This is a great and difficult question.
Whether none of these questions are easy. Yeah, it's so many factors. Let's just name the factors. Items that we really love and are excited about and feel good about telling stories about stay in the line, kind of regardless, even if they're not amazing sellers. If we have a real personal connection to an item, we might kind of take a loss on it in order to keep making it. The items that are, gosh, this is too, the juice cup tumbler thing. The tumblers were just like, I didn't find myself reaching for them. They felt knocked over a lot. I felt like they were too tippy. I wanted to redesign them. We like went back to the drawing board, made the base a little bit wider, but then it didn't look as good. We kind of tried to meet somewhere in the middle. Then it got us like questioning, maybe we should take all the cups besides the mug out and like reintroduce a whole new line of cups that are really thoughtful and make sense together and are 3 different sizes and all of this. And once we kind of started going down that rabbit hole, we realized that if we were going to prioritize adding more objects back to the line, that maybe a tumbler wasn't the thing we wanted to start with. There's only so many things that can fit in a kiln at any given time. So like while we have, while we have so many different products that we want to make, like we've been trying to introduce a platter to the line for the last 3 years, but platters take up a tremendous amount of kiln space. They're not efficient to fire. You lose a lot of them. And when you lose them, it hurts extra because they cost a lot to make. So there's just so many factors that go into it. Like how much, what machines do we currently have people able to operate, and what is the most efficient use of those machines? And can we introduce a product on those machines that is also very desirable, that we can know that we can reasonably sell, that we also feel excited about? Those are many questions that we take. Juice cup and tumblers still do need to revisit. Honestly, every single time it gets put onto an agenda, we're like, we have bigger things to talk about than tumblers and juice cups, and so they poor things keep getting backburnered. So right now we're trying to figure out what's another handled vessel that can go onto the mug machine. Really eager to get coupes and platters out into the world, and that's kind of like all we can handle at the moment. It's hard as like being someone who like gets really excited about introducing new items to the line to finally really recognize just how complicated all this stuff is. And if we, our idea of like just, oh, let's just add this thing, it like ends up being like a lot of money, a lot of people, a lot of time. And those are all things that we don't really have a lot of. That's the short of it.
Thanks, Connie.
Yeah.
Let's see here. What's another good one? This is one. I'll give this one to John. This is from Jody Lewis. I'm a one-potter business at the moment, and I want to grow into something similar to Eastwork in the future. I'd love for you to share how you were able to hire your very first employee. I'm told that's the hardest part.
Yeah. I mean, the first, growing a pottery business, I would say, I mean, the good news is, in our experience, at least, hiring the first employee, in retrospect, wasn't the hardest part. That was actually easy. But it was sort of a unique situation. Our very first employee, Cade, just came to us over and over and kept asking for a job, and they basically convinced us to take that step, just because through their own kind of charisma and talent and skill. And that kind of, in some ways, sort of set us down this path. But I think, I mean, thinking through all the like different factors that went into us being able to grow this thing, it was kind of to some extent, a perfect storm of different resources we are all able to bring to bear on this thing. And even like the work that folks had done before us to kind of plow the field, or I'm not sure what the metaphor is. I mean, there's another question on here about, for example, there's another question I saw on here about how are we able to attract an audience when you're just getting started? And in some ways it feels like we had a bit of a leg up in that front because of the pottery tradition that Alex and I studied in, where there was this kind of established customer base in North Carolina that had been collecting the work of our teachers and kind of their teachers, and there was already sort of a scene there for that. And so we kind of inherited some of that work and that customer base and that audience. Though at the same time, when we designed a new line and kind of stepped away from that tradition, I think we also lost a lot of those customers. But I mean, it's undeniable that was like an important seed that kind of nourished our original growth. So I mean, one thing Alex and I were talking about the other day, like it'd be fun for us to write a book about growing a pottery business. There's like a lot of how-to pottery books out there, but the business side of it is a whole beast unto itself. And it'd be good to get some of that stuff on the paper, just because it's a lot. Yeah, I don't know. total cop out on an answer? Or do y'all have anything to add?
I mean, I think the hardest part is the money, the startup costs for overhead, for equipment, for machines. We had a real leg up there because I had bought, with an inheritance, the property that East Fork started on, and could then had bought it outright and could then take out a mortgage. A mortgage, basically put that up as collateral for the first loan that we got from the bank to buy a new kiln and do that, which for us at that time was a huge amount of expense. And that's just luck. That's pure and simple luck. So there are lots of ways to do it and to scrap it together, but I think that's the hardest thing. It's so capital intensive. Once you start buying new machines and then bigger machines and all of that stuff, I mean, you can keep it relatively simple if you want to just make things on a potter's wheel, and keep it really lean. We sort of hit a point where we could have done that, and we were looking at a future of John and I sitting up at the end of Rascom's Road for the rest of our days, throwing plates, and felt like there maybe was another way. So that's what we did. I've got a question here from that's a good one. What advice would you give your 24-year-old selves? Come back to that.
Can we answer this one about recruitment insights from Vigeland? What are the biggest lessons you learned about hiring, and how do you effectively onboard new folks, especially given your values-driven way of doing business? Can you answer that?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, just hiring is, I have learned so much about how to not just hire someone, but like identify what you need, write a job description, put that job description in front of people who aren't just the same people that you would typically give a job description to because they're in your back pocket and you know them. Ask questions in interviews that are actually relevant to the job at hand. Like I mean, it worked out luckily, but for instance, our senior brand manager, who does a great job at her job, but I remember interviewing her at a coffee shop, and we didn't have a job description. I mean, she was one of our very first hires that wasn't a production hire. And thinking back about it, like, it was not a values aligned way to interview someone. I mean, it was just like, she knew someone who I knew. I liked her shoes. It was just like, yeah, you seem great. You're hired. And she is great. She's great at her job, but that is no longer how we hire people. Now how we had to learn the hard way. And I think that we ended up making some hires where when we were trying to bring on people who were like director level or leadership level, like we didn't really know what we were looking for yet. And so anyone who had any credentials seemed exciting. And so at first we kind of like, we're like, is that, we kind of hired people who had skills on paper, but we didn't actually interview them for the skills that we needed for our company at that moment. And so now, through a lot of lessons learned, at the beginning of, first and foremost, we figure out, what is the business need? What are we hiring for? We do a structured hiring process where we figure out the specific skills that we're looking for, whether that person is going to need to have managerial skills, whether they're going to have the people and culture team have been working on this pay grade work that shows the different pay grades in the company and then all of the qualifications that are required for that pay grade. So figuring out which pay grade is this person going to be in, and what are the soft and hard, we don't use those words, skills that are required for that position. And then we make questions based on those competencies. We ask a lot about, especially for director and manager level roles, we want people to have a familiarity with diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And if they don't have that experience, then we kind of ask questions about their willingness to engage in those conversations. That's something that we've really just realized is, like, if we're going to try to lead with those sorts of values, that having people in management positions who are willing to look at their work and look at their own self and the way they show up in the world through an equity lens is really, really critical. And we don't typically look at, there are a lot of things we don't look at. We don't ask for college degrees on any position. There's certain, roles that require like specialty training, but we do as much as we can to like eliminate any sort of bias from the onset when we see someone's resume, to really focus on the skills that they have that were really like relevant to the work that we're asking them to do. So I think before I used to see someone's resume and like maybe they had a bunch of brand experience with a similar D2C brand, and they had all sorts of different companies on their resume that looked really interesting. But if the things that they were doing at those companies weren't the things that I needed them to do at this company, then they don't become a candidate for that role. So really just like doing everything we can to really clearly lay out what is required of that role, and making sure that the process is screening people specifically for those things to eliminate any sort of bias that you can. Has been a really useful way to make sure you're hiring people who are going to do the job. We also see a lot of times people who like are really excited about the idea of working for a pottery company, and so they kind of like apply for jobs because of their interest in pottery, or their interest in art, or their interest in the company itself. But we're like, unfortunately, this job isn't really a pottery making job. This is a job so getting really clear with people about like what do you actually want to accomplish at this job? What are your career path? What's your career path? Is that applicable here? Are you going to be unhappy in this role and just want to jump to another role right away? Anyway, I just had that awkward sense. I forgot that like no one's responding to me. I was like, why is everybody being so quiet? It's because everyone is silent over there. It's like, maybe it's being boring. I hate not having like is that all making sense? I don't know. Does anyone have any specific questions about hiring and recruiting that they want to know more about in the chat?
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, you all fill in any questions. I scrolled all the way down to the bottom, and there's some great new questions popping in here. This is from Brian Earwood. How much capital would you suggest one have before scaling up? It obviously depends on like what you're doing, what you're scaling up, what kind of business is it, but something that John always likes to make sure is that we have 3 months of operating cash in the bank at all times. So if sales completely ground to a halt for some reason, we would have 3 months of operating cash. If you're growing and you've got a large period of being not profitable as you're in that scaling period, you have to factor that in and always ensure that you have that cash cushion. So he's got spreadsheets and graphs that basically show that cash threshold of where we are at any point in time with our sales projections and our break even. What's our break even and how far are we from that break even point? And we track that. And sometimes we fluctuate, above and below, but over the last 8 months or so, we've been above it, which has been amazing. So yeah, that doesn't answer the question directly, but ensuring that you have at least a few months of operating expense in the bank at all times, and then backing yourself into that equation, looking at how long it's going to take before you actually are profitable. Someone also mentioned if we've looked at PE or VC, and we certainly have. That's in my wheelhouse. I sort of lead up all those fundraising efforts, and we haven't found a partner that we've felt aligned with yet. And we've had a lot of conversations and people have reached out to us. But we've just been in a place where we haven't needed to. We have an amazing group of investors that are all individuals, and we have an advisory board, and they're very involved. And we haven't needed to go that route yet. That's not to say in the future we won't, but at the moment we haven't. So, but we certainly do look at it and entertain those conversations. But a lot of it comes to the expectations. So if somebody has a really firm expectation that you know, they're going to come in, they're going to buy this much of the company, and then in 5 years they're going to, you know, come in and force that repayment in some fashion. We're not as interested in that. So that basically shuts down a lot of those conversations. Yeah. Any plans for a bigger mug, 16 ounce maybe? No?
So we just gave that survey, and everyone thought that we internally, we all really wanted the little mug to be the winner because it's our favorite. Just like as a team.
Sunday morning mug?
No, the 8-ounce mug, the third wave mug, which we are making in Taro and hopefully Spider in the spring. But we all assumed that the big mug was going to be the winner of that survey because we get a lot of requests for it. But the Sunday morning mug was actually the winner of that survey. And we were all excited about that because we really like that one. It is a big mug. It holds more than our regular mug, but it's like round and like latte cup shaped.
I didn't know it held more.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big. We want to make all the mugs, but it's only just a matter of one thing at a time.
Here's a question from an anonymous attendee. It seems East Fork has been wildly successful through word of mouth marketing. How do you build community? What has helped you be successful with customer to customer marketing?
We make a really good product. I think one of the statistics that we don't really talk about very much that I am super, super, super proud of is that we have a less than 1% return rate, which in our industry is shocking. For homewares online, return rates can hover in 25 to 30%. Like people buy stuff, they try it out, they send it back. But the very, very, very vast majority, in fact, 99.x% of people get the pots and they really like them, and they usually come back and buy more. And so I think that that's a lot of it, is that we are really thoughtful about the things that we make, and that can be really disgruntling for customers who think that we're using scarcity marketing tactics or aren't making enough stuff. But actually the stuff takes a lot of time. It's labor intensive, it's cost intensive, developing products on these machines that still have the same quality of pots that Alex and John were making when they were throwing everything on the wheel is something that we take really seriously, and it doesn't happen overnight. So we end up with products that are really thoughtful, and we try, as a marketing and creative team, we try to do the best we can to let people know on our website what they're getting into when they're going to make a purchase. And so while we see our conversion rate or our first time to purchase is a lot, it takes a long time for people to be introduced to us and then finally make a purchase because it's a high price point, because it can be a little bit confusing. That's a big struggle for me as we're trying to grow. How do we get people to kind of immediately understand the brand and what we're about, so that they can understand why we're charging so much for a mug or a plate and still be called to purchase it without coming back to the website for 13 weeks. But on the flip side of that, we do so much storytelling at the onset about who we are and the products that we make and what people should expect when they come to their homes, that by the time those pots make it to someone's home, it's exactly what they were expecting, and there's no big surprises, and people end up coming back and purchasing more. So still trying to figure out how to sell mugs to first-time purchasers a little bit faster than we do right now, but very, very, it still feels good to know that people who do buy our pots are really, really happy with their purchases, and they tell people about it. And there's all sorts of other ways we do community engagement. I think that I like to think of marketing before computers existed and before advertising as it really existed. Having a successful business really depended on being a good neighbor and having a good reputation in your community and doing right by people and being good to your customers, which is first and foremost what we try to do. We try to be a good neighbor to fellow businesses in Western North Carolina and activists in Western North Carolina. We try to take our involvement, our position as community leaders really seriously, and we know that people are looking at us all the time for that sort of guidance, and we take that role really seriously. And so I guess the community building just comes from recognizing that your business, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists in conversation with a town and the global society, and making sure that you're being a good neighbor.
And I think it also comes with the voice that Connie brings to our marketing channels, which is very sincere. It's more sincere than most other companies out there. And Connie talks to everybody in a way that just it's transparent and authentic, but brands try to be authentic and they try to do these things, but I don't think anybody really hits it quite like Connie does, and that's the difference between sincerity and authenticity, I think. Another marketing question. This is just a quick one because I want to move through a bunch of these questions. If you have a question or none of us answer, it's probably because you can read about it on the website in like the About Us, some of the history questions and things like that. There's so many great questions though. So if your question's not answered, I'm sorry, but yeah, poke around on the website and see what you can find. Is it easier to teach someone who's done the job the space, or to teach someone who knows the space to do the job? This is a great question.
Great question. I don't know.
We're figuring that out.
Yeah, we're figuring that out. I think that I'm hiring for a director of marketing right now, and that is my number one question. Do I hire someone who is a traditional marketer who knows analytics like the back of their hand, is a really good manager, is a good project manager, understands how to run a budget? Like, does it matter if they've worked in direct to consumer? Does it matter if they've worked in e-commerce? Or do I find someone who's really well connected in the brand? I mean, so many of our other people in homewares, like they all came from other D2C businesses. Like they all came, like were, brand people at Warby Parker or worked at Food 52 or whatever. And like they started jobs. And so they already had this built-in network of people who can share these resources. And we were certainly not that. And sometimes I'm like, I just wish that we were in New York and had friends who were famous chefs and could just call them up and ask them for a favor. And so part of me likes the idea of hiring someone who's really familiar with the space. But I think that I've decided, especially for this director of marketing position, that finding someone who's first and foremost a really good manager and a really good people person, who's going to be able to come in and see what we've built right now and not immediately try to say, I'm going to do it this way, who can really have a lot of respect for the kind of scrappy way we've done it, and then slowly start to kind of corral us wily creatives into something that has a little bit more structure to the strategy. Not that our strategy doesn't have any structure, but we're certainly needing someone to help me manage the creative and marketing budget and set some reasonable goals and to be able to track them with the many tools out there that already exist for tracking them. So I think it depends on the job, it depends on the person, but right now I think having someone who has the skills and then being able to kind of introduce new ways of doing things or new ways of approaching the work. Though as I'm saying that, I'm like, no, hire someone who, I don't know. I have no idea. It's a hard question.
This is a quick question from Farah. Nice to see you on here, Farah. Any plans to expand to other cities? Not right now. If we were being really bullish, we'd probably go out and try to get a bunch of cheap leases, which can be found right now. But I think we're really focusing inwards and taking stock of where we're at and building our own sort of internal durability and resilience, and not trying to add more complexity to the thing that's happening. I would love to see a few more beautiful esports stores in other cities. We love connecting with people in that way, and we love having events and throwing parties and doing all of those things. So one day, yes, but not on the immediate horizon. How about, do you have an in-house web developer for all of your fancy features? This is from Vienne.
No, we don't, but that'd be sick if we did.
we've talked about it a lot.
Yeah, our website has been, I'm glad to hear you say that it has fancy features. It's been kind of bricolage. It's we're actually rebuilding the whole thing top to bottom right now. Actually bottom to top. It's been the first time we're working with someone with an agency named When We Wonder, and it's the first time that we have like when we first built the website, we like saw pictures of what it was going to look like, and then like worked from the window trimmings down to the foundation, which ended up setting us on this course of like like if you see like a building that was like had a really like someone just kind of moved in and started like architecting strange pieces to it, and like new owners came in and like started doing a different style over here, and built like a little New England clapboard on one side, and then like a Mexican tiles on the other, like where it starts like not really making any sense, and then you look down and you're like, like the floor is rotting. That's kind of what our website is right now. And so we're tearing it all down, building the foundation and building it back up. And we are doing that with an outside developer, and he's hopefully going to get it to a point where then we can really self-manage and do some like super basic stuff. And then when we want to add fancy features, then we can outsource that for like a project basis. But yeah, don't have the budget right now for an in-house developer.
Here's a question from Elizabeth Simakoff. I'm sorry if I'm butchering everybody's names. John, this one you can take. Do you profit share with employees? Why or why not?
Yeah, so that's since the kind of get-go, one of the goals we had was using East Fork as a tool for kind of financial stability for all of our employees and team members, and et cetera. So we've been talking about different structures for profit sharing, like ESOPs, as like a formal consideration, and then just bonuses through payroll on the lower end of complexity. But in a formal sense, no, we haven't profit shared to date, and that's mainly because we haven't had profits to share. On an annual basis, for the past 3 years, we've run up losses on our tax returns. And so that said, that's still kind of a medium-term goal for us. From what I understand, it seems like the clearest, quickest path for us to do that will be kind of in the early stages, just do profit sharing through payroll, just through kind of bonuses at the end of the year, instead of having a formal legal structure like an ESOP trust in place. But then as we scale, implementing something like an ESOP or rearranging our legal structure to actually share profits seems like a really exciting possibility for us. So that's the long and short of it. In a technical sense, we have not yet, just for lack of profits, but it's
planned. It was planned, not on profitability, but
right. Yeah, that wasn't a terrible surprise.
Yeah.
Given our growth.
Yael has asked, have you read The Introduction to Sacred Economics? I think it describes why your company appeals to folks. I have not, but I always love an interesting business book, and we'll check that out. Another one is Small is Beautiful that I want to read, which is by an economist who I can't remember the name. Somebody I'm sure knows and could type it into the chat. But yeah, that one I'd like to challenge my own inner desire for grandeur and big things. This is from our friend Seth Connolly, who, shout out to a cool local business, owns with his partner Garden Party, which is a really cool shop in Asheville. They've got a great website. Check them out. Can you talk a bit about capital raises, how and why you structured the investment as you did? So we already touched a bit on this. I'll go quick, but we needed a significant amount of money to make the big jump when we moved into this factory. And we knew that the only way to do that was to bring in outside investors. A lot of this was to get the momentum, was serendipitous. And we had people kind of approach us without really knowing that we'd been talking about this stuff. So there was a lot of luck. There was a lot of serendipity that played into that. When you talk about access to capital, you also have to acknowledge like who are your friends. If you're like, there are some people that know a lot more people with money than other people, primarily, white guys who are like, me and many other people, like your proximity to wealth is going to make it easier for you to bring in money. So there's always a kind of disparity there. But we approached people, we had a big enough idea that it made sense for the people that we were talking to. If you're talking to a VC, you're going to need to tell them an enormous idea, the moonshot idea, and you're going to have to be ready to go after that with everything you have. Keep raising money and be on this kind of treadmill of raising cash. That is slowly changing, I think, especially in our world, this direct to consumer like product brand world. There's not a lot of happy endings from that, or we haven't seen a whole lot of happy endings yet. But we found some really aligned people that loved what we had built already. And it was not like it was already somewhat baked, the idea. And that's, yeah, how we did it. And Seth, you can always reach out and I'm happy to chat more about it too. This is a question from Mackenzie. What are you doing to enrich the lives of your employees out of the office? Yeah, we've talked a lot about this kind of a 3-part support system. And one of those parts is like supporting people to take a class, do mentorship, do something to support people, like exploring an extracurricular activity. And those have not gotten sort of fully off the ground yet. But what, Connie, or John, how do we support people outside of work? Because I can mostly think about how we sort of fail in that perspective by asking.
I'm not really sure about if the question means like fostering community during pandemic and people working outside of the office, or like supporting people's like outside of like the basic like rules of the job. Here's your job, here's your, you know what I mean?
I mean, to me, this kind of gets at what you're saying, you were talking about earlier, Connie, of like us finding the appropriate boundaries of what we can and what we can't do. And I think, yeah, like, this is an interesting topic. And to me, this is kind of one of the unknowns as we grow, as East4 can kind of like experiment around this hypothesis of using a business as a tool for social good, and what is the appropriate role for employers to play in that space, and what can we do for our employees, and what shouldn't we or can't we. But I think, yeah, like Alex was saying, I think there's some clear stuff of like resources we can connect folks with, like from a very traditional way of just like benefits, health insurance, life insurance, IRA, like, personal financial wellness education, but deeper stuff too of more focused programming for different folks, and just being thoughtful around like what resources do our employees need access to, and what resources can we as a employer connect them with. But then also like not overstepping boundaries. Like one interesting conversation we've had is like this idea of people talking about businesses or jobs or employers being like families, and like that being a nebulous space of like, do we want to actually be a family, or do we want to, be in a group of people who work together but have our own personal spaces outside of that, and just levels of intimacy that maybe we don't want to hold in a workspace. So yeah, that's a big one for me.
Yeah, that's a really big one. I've like changed my mind about it a lot. I change my mind about it all the time. But yeah, I think that I used to come in, I worked in restaurants my whole life, and there's that like very family oriented aspect of that can feel like, especially for people who come from situations where family life isn't awesome, it can feel like really integral to a sense of self to have a workplace that feels like family. The only issue is that in those sorts of workplaces, like it's not unconditional love, and also it kind of like allows permission to talk to people and like kind of repeat behaviors that you might have repeated in unhealthy family cycles. And so I'm sure anyone who's on this call who's worked in restaurants has had their fair share of people screaming at each other in the walk-in and throwing shit around and getting really mad. And I think I've always been like trying to be like, I'm just gonna have a big personality. I'm just really passionate. Like, you should be able to take it. And I've had to challenge myself a lot to recognize that there are certain ways of communicating with people who you have a really deep, trusting, loving, unconditional relationship with. But probably those aren't people who are just like coworkers who are just trying to do their job. So yeah, trying to balance everybody's boundaries and let people who just want to come and like, I want Youth Fork to be a place where people can also just come put their head down and do their job if they need to, if that's what they need. So it's really about like figuring out what needs we are and aren't able to accommodate, and then again communicating clearly about that.
And that's like a super active process, because in the beginning we basically were incredibly naive and still are to some extent in the sort of discovery process around this. But we were like, we're going to make the best company ever. We're going to make this the best place to work in the world. And we actually sort of like went sort of too far around the circle to where you offer too much, people then expect more and then are more let down in a sense when you can't actually provide the things that make everyone happy in their life and fulfilled in their life, and that's not necessarily the response. So we're grappling with that and thinking about it and trying to figure that out. I mean, there's another very simple thing is there's a company in Italy, a fashion design company called Brunello Cucinelli, and they turn their email off at night. You can't send a work email at night. I would love to figure out if our Gmail Google Suite could do that. I don't know if it could, but it would be amazing. I mean,
we're going to move on to this question before Alex and I get in a fight about that.
About what? Turning email off at night?
You know how I feel about this. It's not the solution to these problems. It's not.
I like absolute, that sort of stuff. All right, we've got just 2 minutes. What new technologies get you excited about the future of pottery? That's an interesting question from Brian. I think the part of making pottery that is the most energy, that's the biggest energy suck, is firing pieces to 2,300 degrees. And as far as new technology, there's not been that much that has come around. So I think the thing that we talk about and get it, I mean, obviously there's solar. Solar has an issue with firing things at scale because electricity is just not actually like, it would take an enormous solar array to power a kiln of the size that we would need at the scale that we're moving towards. But alternative fuels are one thing that will be interesting to explore. There's microwave technology, which is a sort of hybrid of obviously using electricity plus gas fired. So there's some hybrids there that I think are pretty interesting to explore. And what would be amazing, and these are this kind of things that like either you wait till you have the money to do these explorations yourself, or you say we're going to do these explorations and we're going to raise some money to help do that. So these are like all of the questions that get balanced when we're looking at like, do we raise money? We could raise money and suddenly we could have an engineering department that's working on this, or we wait and we grow and do it without. So all things that we're wrestling with. We're at time. John, Connie, do either of you have a question that you want to take before we say goodbye?
I got a phone call scheduled for 5, so I'll have to hop off shortly here.
Okay.
I see PR on there wanting to know if Ember is going to return, and I will tell you, PR, that Paul Rose Stark, I am petitioning the material sciences team to make me a set of Ember glazes, of Ember breakfast bowls, because I too like to glaze. But yeah, I would love to see Ember return one day. Don't give up hope. It's a possibility.
You weren't a big Ember fan back in the day, though. I loved it.
I love it. It just didn't go with our decor back then.
Yeah.
I'm more neutral. Ember's not neutral enough for me.
Sound like soapstone.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Well, thanks everybody. Sorry we all are kind of booked. We can't keep going. But thank you all for logging on and listening, and this will be available, I'm sure, on Instagram. Uh-oh. There's John's phone call.
Bye, John.
Yeah, we'll post this for folks to check out. If you've got a question that wasn't answered, feel free to shoot it over. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I
Appreciate
appreciate it.
Bye.
Yep.